There we go. All right. And so, of course, we left off with starting to show some sculpting off, really with just the draw brush, right? Now, remember, you need to kind of have your UVs unwrapped. Basically, your base mesh built in a pretty good state. Obviously, as you go and do even more advanced stuff, you can start to do sculpting and retopo stuff for parts of your models. We're just not doing it for these videos. And for our class, it's just a little bit more straightforward for us to just do box modeling for this stuff. So it's kind of one of those things we're omitting from this. But it's also great to just have a good box modeling set of skills for building character creatures anyways. And then you could fold in sculpting and retopoing parts and aspects of the models. All right, so remember, there's a sculpting workspace, of course, right? Just like we have a modeling workspace, UV editing workspace. Remember, you want to mirror your model over so it's fully complete and UV unwrapped. And we did, in our blue wrench, add a modifier, the multi-resolution modifier, right? So it's a different modifier, multi-resolution. Remember, that allows us to subdivide this mesh a couple of times so that we now have hundreds of thousands of polygons. Now, depending on your device, you can go much higher than that, right? A lot of your guys' devices aren't that powerful, though, so realistically, you might be able to break 1 million, maybe a couple million. See how far you can go before your computer just shuts down, or doesn't shut down, but really slows down to the point of not being usable, right? Obviously, a better computer, a proper desktop with a good 3D card in it, you can easily get up to like tens of millions of polygons, right? So Blender is more than capable of getting up to tens of millions of polygons, 30, 40, 50 million polygons in a scene with multi-resolution, even with a halfway decent gaming computer, right? And even halfway decent gaming PC. If you really spend several grand on like a full workstation, you can push even harder, right? But kind of keep in mind that subdivide until as far as your device can handle it, right? We're going to keep ours simpler. We're not going to push to go really, really hardcore in this. It's more getting some good fundamental sculpting skills. But remember, these are some of the basics that you want to have on there. Remember, 5 is sculpt mode, right? That's kind of our quiz, our mini quiz today, right? Sculpt mode, right? Remember, it is up here though, right? So if you click on this little button right up, it's this little pull down menu right up here, kind of below File and Edit. It's kind of right up in this area. Remember, you have your modes here. One of them is sculpt mode, which is 5, right? Which is 5. And once you've got that on, you'll see all your sculpting tools show up in your sculpting workspace. Remember, go up here to turn on symmetry, because we have our UVs on top. We want a symmetry sculpt also. This is something that is toggleable, right? You can turn it off, and then you can sculpt on one side, and it won't happen on the other. But particularly for sculpting, you're not going to use a mirror modifier. Multi-resolution and mirror modifiers can't work together. So you have to use the actual symmetry functionality up here. This doesn't handle all symmetry functionality, though. It really handles only transformation functionality, right? So like your tweak tool, move, rotate, scale tool, your sculpting tools can use this and it works. But if you were going to like extrude, loop cut, you would actually need the mirror modifier to really kind of do more normal modeling instead of just shaping stuff. And we really just looked at the draw brush and stuff like that. We subdivided a couple times. All right, let me see here. Let me see if they're here really quick. Brandon, can you come up and grab this for me? All right. So basically, that's kind of where we're at with this, sculpting-wise. Okay, thank you. All right. So that's kind of where we're at sculpting, right? We've subdivided a couple times with multi-resolution. We've got our symmetry on. Just want to kind of do a little bit of refresher on that stuff, right? Actually, it's for Brandon over there. Yeah. The very right corner, back right corner. There you go. He is. All right. So basically, right, we can sculpt through here. Now, one of the tools I wanted to start to show you guys was not just the draw tool, right? This is pretty good as just a kind of a regular sculpting tool, right? Remember, your right and left brackets can kind of push up or down, right? They can kind of go up or down your scales. S, left mouse button, can do size as well. And remember, if you hold down control, it inverses your brush. It sets it to negative, right? By default, the draw brush pulls the polygons out, right? So if I just left click drag, you see how it kind of moves them out. But negative pushes it in. But control is a nice quick key for that. Yeah. So basically, kind of just, you can do a little more shaping right there if you want to. Remember, shift will smooth, right? So you see a lot of this is stuff we were kind of talking about in the previous video, right? We can kind of just pull and push and move. So we just kind of move these around a little bit. Now, of course, we can do some sculpting up here if I wanted to, right? We could always kind of pull out a little bit of form here for the kind of the horns, right? Where the kind of horns meet the skin. There we go. So we can easily kind of pull that out a bit. Just sculpting it, right? So this is just more draw stuff. Now, what happens when you want to kind of define a shape a little bit sharper? Maybe you want to kind of start to do a wrinkle kind of shape or form. There's actually a brush for this called crease, right? It's actually one of the last blue ones here, right? So if you go way down here, you'll see there's kind of a blue crease one. It's the very last of these blue brushes. And what this does is it's automatically negative, so it pushes in, right? But you see that the brush menu actually has settings in here. And you see how pinch is set up? You have hardness control. So there's actually some neat controls for the brushes themselves. Pinch, hardness. So pinch is actually what's going to allow this crease to work. Now if I zoom in a little bit, and remember I have this really cool preference on. If I go to Edit Preferences, right? If you go to Navigation, there's actually this feature called Orbit Around Selection. Right? I have this checked on. This works for when you're tweaking or selecting stuff, normal modeling. It kind of sets your camera rotate around what's selected. So it kind of has this kind of automatic focus feature to a certain extent. But believe it or not, this orbit around selection option also works for sculpting and painting. Wherever you last sculpted or painted, it kind of sets your camera rotate around that, right? That's what your camera rotate's also called, orbit. So if I just left click drag, you see how this kind of automatically kind of creates a crease shape? So when you want to start to get wrinkles, one, you need to have enough polygons, right? So if you're trying to use crease on like level 1, you're probably not going to get much unless it's a large crease. You're probably going to want to be at level 3 or 4. Get yourself up to hundreds of thousands or even millions of polygons. But you see how it kind of pushes in, but it also pinches. So you see how it kind of creates this nice wrinkled form? So crease can be a great kind of function for doing this stuff too. Increase a little bit there. Now if I hold down shift, remember shift is your automatic feature for your smooth. You see how I can kind of soften and blend and fade kind of these corners here? So smoothing is always part of the sculpting process, right? You're always going to be using a brush and then maybe a little bit of smooth. Rarely does something stay the same kind of crease all the way through. At some point, you're often going to see it kind of fades and blends into the surrounding skin. Remember, shift is kind of that decrumpling. It kind of tries to make the surface pretty smooth again, right? Hence why it's called smooth. That is a brush. It's the very top of these orange brushes, right below crease, smooth. But shift is your quick key to go from any brush automatically to the smooth. Just like control generally inverses the brush you're on, right? So you see this crease brush could be a great way to add a nice kind of bit of wrinkling or just fat folds or muscle folds in a section. So it's not just going to be things like draw, it's going to be things like crease that are going to allow you to do a lot of neat stuff. So take advantage of these brushes to do some kind of neat shaping and forming, right? I can enhance this more. I can easily enhance that more. We can create a little bit of creasing around there, maybe. So see how creasing can be a really, really cool function to add kind of some form there to these parts of the models. We can even use it here to kind of define this shape better. So the crease brush is a really, really, really cool brush, right? It allows you to do some neat detailing. And you notice how that orbit around selection, my actual rotate, my camera rotate, is constantly focusing around where I was last sculpting, right? That's why that preference is really cool. Edit preferences, navigation, orbit around selection, right? It's a really neat preference. Of course, I could put a little bit of skin folds up here on the forehead if I wanted to a little bit. So see how this crease brush can be really, really cool for adding forms? So I actually love the crease brush, right? Lots of things have folds and pinching and wrinkles and stuff like that. And so this could be a great way to kind of add some of that form to your model, right? You see how it could be used to enhance some of these areas here as well. So don't be afraid to get in here and try playing with this brush a little bit to kind of add a little bit more kind of nuance or sharpness to an area. I'm holding down Shift to do a little more smoothing, right? You can come in here with that crease to start to maybe develop a little bit of the kneecap a little bit here, right? Shift to smooth, though. You see how you kind of want to soften that usually a little bit? So the crease brush is honestly a really cool brush, right? Draw is pretty great. Crease is pretty great. Carve can be great if you're trying to do something even sharper than a crease, right? Draw sharp. But there's a lot of neat stuff you could. I could kind of do a little bit of skin folds back here, wrinkle folds kind of on the knee. Kind of on the back of the knee there a little bit. So you can easily start to kind of do some cool development of stuff. Remember, right and left bracket will make your brushes bigger or smaller. Of course, S, left mouse drag, will do that as well. And you see I can kind of do a little bit of a crease right here, kind of between your toes a little bit. So take advantage of the fact that this crease brush can do some pretty neat stuff. Right? It can allow you to kind of enhance some of that tone and form there. I often find it can be pretty cool at adding a little bit of muscle tone as well. You see I can kind of do a little bit of crease here to kind of give myself a little bit of a muscle tone there on the leg, a little bit of a muscle tone here. So you often find you can come in here and really take advantage of this crease brush to add a nice little bit of extra toning to some of these areas. So crease brush is really awesome. You're going to find that, particularly if you're not going to do any super heavy sculpting, that just some draw and some crease on a subdivide a couple of times is still going to allow you to do some cool stuff, right? In terms of defining some muscle forms and shapes. So take advantage of some of these brushes that are available to you, right? They can allow you to kind of add some tone here. Remember, crease brush, really, really cool. You'll notice I'm holding down Shift, though, to often soften, right? Often it can lay it in a little too harsh in some spots. And oftentimes, like I said, sometimes these forms and muscle forms will blend into other forms around, right? So crease brush is a great way to kind of develop and build some of these, right? We can kind of maybe add a little bit of kind of ab definition there if we wanted to a little bit here, right? Probably have them a little further in, but you get what we're kind of saying, right? You can kind of really develop some of this form a little bit better if you want to. Soften it there a little bit, maybe come back and enhance a little bit more. Remember, we're going to have kind of shorts on this character. Soften a lot there. But anyways, right? This is just kind of some of the neat stuff you can kind of do with the crease brush to add in extra form to your model that you maybe wouldn't expect. And we can come back in here, do a little more creasing there. Maybe a little bit here, a little bit kind of underneath the wrist here a little bit. You can even start to kind of create a little bit of that crease on the hand. So take advantage of some of this stuff to kind of add some of those little wrinkles and creases that you get in parts of your models. You can even enhance the bends between your fingers, right? So crease brush is definitely a favorite of mine. It's pretty neat doing a lot of these forms. Remember, shift though to smooth. We often want to soften these a bit at their edges. Remember, shift automatically goes to smooth no matter what brush you're on. So allow you to kind of go in and constantly enhance and play with some of these forms a little bit. There we go. It's a little too hard there still. There we go. Shift for smooth a little bit more. And you see how so much of this is the same stuff, right? I'm not really doing much in the way of new, just kind of creasing and then maybe soften a little bit. But it really can allow you to kind of throw in a bit of kind of that nice little muscle tone and definition that you might want. So crease brush is great. It's kind of that bottom of these. It's already set to negative, so it's pushing in, but it's also using the pinch control in the brush menu here, right? You can add textures to your models. You can even play with different strokes, right? And this is the kind of stuff we're going to eventually see more of in the next couple of days, right? But I figured this would be a great way to kind of get you guys seeing that even if you don't get that far, right, just using 2 default brushes with basically the default settings, you can actually do some cool sculpting. Just draw brush or crease brush, right? Draw sharp, you'll see, is actually sharper than the crease is, right? Doesn't even have that actual control for creasing or pinching, because it's not quite as tight, right? The pinch kind of is tighter in the valley of the sculpt. This is kind of wider in the valley of this sculpt. So it's kind of like just kind of a harsher one, right? So if you want to do stuff with that one, you can as well. But that's kind of more for when you're really trying to get something harsh, like maybe up here for your horns, right? You just want something a bit more harsh than that crease would give you. And once again, you see how that orbit around selection is coming in handy? My camera rotate is working around where the brush is at, sculpting-wise, right? And remember, that works for our normal modeling, right? We had that on for the normal modeling, and that was really cool. So like wherever I was tweaking, when I was shaping stuff, or even moving, rotating, I do that. Besides draw sharp, right, it's kind of crease without the pinching, right? The pinching, by its nature, kind of, it's thinner in the valley, right? Kind of the dip in the crease, that's the valley. And it's thinner there because it's pinching more. The draw sharp kind of, it's thicker in the valley, and so it makes more of a proper gash, right? It's kind of more akin to, I think, that like what the, I feel like Mudbox is called the carve brush. I'm trying to think. I want to say it's the dam brush in ZBrush. You see how this can kind of work to give you some kind of cool detailing here? And you notice how you can still do some decent detailing, particularly if you're not trying to get ridiculously fine details, at just subdivision level 3, right? Now, of course, if you want to, you can, while you're in sculpt mode, right, you do need to be in sculpt mode 5, page down will actually go down to your next resolution. Page down will go down again to that next resolution. And you see how some of that shape and form is lost when we get to the lower levels? Now, that's naturally going to be part of it because, right, we were sculpting some of that detail at a couple 100,000 polygons. So some of that detail is always going to be lost. One of the things that's cool, though, is the multi-resolution modifier has a menu down here called Shape that you can open up. And you can actually apply any shaping you're doing to the base mesh, the lowest resolution. And so when I apply base, you see how it actually has enhanced that form a bit more at the lower level? So you see how there's a difference? Right? It does actually, when you open that up and apply to base, it does kind of try to apply as much as it can to that lower level of shaping. So any shaping you do at the higher level, if it's a large enough shaping element that it affects kind of the lowest levels, you can actually make sure that the base level, the level 0, gets some of that shaping too. Love that feature in Blender. It's quite cool. And now you can see that just kind of at our higher levels, we've got some cooler detailing, right? Probably overdid it a little bit, just trying to show you just these 3 brushes, but I didn't really set any options differently for those 3 brushes. I was just using 3 presets, right? Draw, crease, and draw sharp. Right? You can play with the strengths a little bit. Control inverses them, shift smooths. You always want to shift a little bit to soften some areas. Remember, if you go to the wrench and screwdriver here, I like to turn off in the strength area kind of the 2 paintbrushes, right? You see there's a paintbrush facing up and then a smaller paintbrush facing down. I like to turn those off so that my strength is not unified, so that I can have separate strength controls for my different brushes. So each strength will be unique for each brush. So that's, I think, some good sculpting for today. And then we'll do another sculpting video, probably on the gear, where we could show off some strokes and maybe a little bit of painting with sculpting with textures. All right, well, that'll be good for today.